Cinema Classics is brought to you by the Gateway Film Center, 1550 North High Street. Further details and showtimes are online at gatewayfilmcenter.com.
The award-winning Cinema Classics is produced by John DeSando and Johnny DiLoretto. Listen to the shows online at wcbe.org. I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Johnny DiLoretto, and this is Cinema Classics, and we are at the Gateway Film Center.
And at your peril, you will ignore this.
Okay.
And you will ignore that little photo, obviously too small for our audience to see, but my partner can certainly see it, and I'm going to quiz him
Your
on
partner.
that.
Me?
Yeah.
Or that Oscar guy?
Well,
that looks like an Oscar.
how about right next to it in the photo?
Yeah, that is, that's John Wayne and Montgomery Clift and John Ireland.
Got it.
Is it Red River? Is that
No,
from Red River?
and there's no reason you can tell that. We're talking about cinematographers today.
Yeah.
And the cinematographer who did that, which is a shot from HUD.
Oh, that's from HUD.
Yeah, right. And you obviously silhouette.
Oh, good Lord,
Bergman
that's
likes
right.
silhouette. You can't
Yeah.
tell. But that's James Wong Howe.
James Wong Howe. He was a mighty giant in the field of cinematography.
Yeah.
I know that name.
50s, 60s,
Even the
40s.
Exactly. Way back to the
yeah.
40s. Wong Howe probably was a contemporary of Greg Toland.
Oh, good
most
for you.
famous for shooting Citizen Kane. And he's credited, among other things, with developing deep focus. So one of the things that Wells wanted to achieve in Citizen Kane was to have something in the foreground in intense focus, and then something way in the background in intense focus that hadn't been done before. Toland figured that out and was able to create this really, so you had this monstrous figure up front and then these little crisp figures in the back. I mean, it's a trick.
And that's really something that we are going to be dealing with in the next few minutes, because there are a raft of great cinematographers out there. If you look it up, if you do it, you can get lists of 50. And every one of them, you look at the films they've done, you say, of course, that's a great cinematographer. So we can't do that today.
Yeah.
For instance, Raoul Coutard is the cinematographer for our new wave, Breathless.
Oh, is that right?
And along the lines of what you're discussing, he's the one who really introduced the handheld camera and the lighting. You remember all that was
At
characteristic.
Godard's behest. I mean, he was probably, I would imagine, a cinematographer of that period was probably not in love with what Godard was asking for.
And you're so right, because in the case of, for instance, the Robert Burks, whom nobody has heard of, did all kinds of Hitchcock movies. North by Northwest, Rear Window.
This was shot by a guy named Robert Burks?
Yes, Robert Burks.
Okay.
And what you're hitting at the point that I found in my research and discovery of this is that most often the director is credited.
Yeah, with how the film looks.
Yes, how the film looks, when in fact the people in the industry know it was these guys who did it. And that's why it has developed that cinematographers have been called the director's best friend.
Sure. Well, because they're most responsible for realizing the director's vision and establishing the tone. I mean, I've always been fascinated with that. How does, on a different day, given different conditions, how does the film, which they take sometimes 90 days, sometimes 120 days to shoot these things, how do they make it look one way from start to finish? I mean, it's hard work. I recently had the pleasure of working on a locally produced film, and the cinematographer was brought in from LA. And it was a low budget indie short, and yet the attention paid to the cinematography, the detail. I was trying to say a word I couldn't say. Was astonishing. And you know what? The cinematographer's best friend is the lighter, the lighting guy,
and of course,
girl.
Yeah.
So you have this relationship between the director, the cinematographer, and the lighting director.
Got it.
And they work in tight unison to achieve the exact look from frame to frame.
And that's one of the things that attracted me to film in the first place. Way out west, I
Mhm.
used to, as a kid, look at these landscapes, this
Yeah.
beautiful color and the blue skies. And this was the time when Technicolor was big.
Yeah.
So it was just splashing all over me, but I was unaware that there was somebody in there, and maybe a
Mhm.
couple of people, who were actually taking pains to give me the impression that my eyes can't see.
Yeah.
I mean, that's better color, better visual than
Right.
I'm able to see,
Right.
which is
They're
extraordinary.
painting with
Yeah.
light.
And you know, it's
What do
like,
you got?
Yeah,
Let's,
okay.
let's talk about some.
yeah. For instance, here's one when I knew that there probably weren't any Americans who were cinematographers.
Mhm.
Vilmos Zsigmond.
I know that name from some Woody Allen movies.
And he has
Right?
done most famously, and he's certainly the color and the natural light are his keynote.
Okay.
But the big one for him is Close Encounters.
Wow.
But you
And
see
you're
his
talking
name.
about that Western landscape.
Yes,
See, I mean,
exactly.
It's no
Yes,
mistake
yes.
that Spielberg ends that story in John Ford territory.
Well, then let me take another foreign.
that was a really smart observation.
That's another one.
Mhm.
Tak Fujimoto.
Yeah, Tak Fujimoto, I know that.
Okay, and everybody knows that Badlands is in large part cinematography, ratcheted up. to the next.
Badlands, the Terrence Malick
Yes,
film.
yes, very good,
And
very
the story
good.
behind Days of Heaven, John,
Yes,
is that I believe that Terrence Malick only wanted to shoot during magic hour.
I
You
know
what
it. I've
magic
heard
hour
that.
is?
I've heard that. Yes.
Magic hour is the hour from like, it's the hour where the sun is either rising or setting, where it's just perfectly low in the sky, casting that impossibly orange, golden, amber glow on everything. That's magic hour. It only lasts an hour, and as you can imagine, some of these shots, even like I mentioned, this locally produced film, it takes sometimes an hour to 2 to 3 hours to set up one shot. So imagine having a limited window of
Well,
opportunity.
and for your cinematographer Conrad Hall,
Mm-hmm.
he is as well known for perfecting the idea of light hitting the lens, which everybody thought was a mistake. He's very and dirty film, as they call it. He took those mistakes.
The lens
and-
flare.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And one of his great films,
Mhm.
Conrad Hall, is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yeah, wow, that's right.
And when you think about the beautiful
Mhm.
photography in that one, riding a bicycle.
And think about what he's doing there, which he's playing with the old photographs that had that sort of amber tint.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
And he comes in and out of that, especially in the beginning. If you remember, that opening sequence is all shot in that overly romanticized amber tint, and then they start playing
Exactly.
cards and the color fades in. That's great.
Exactly. In a more contemporary way, what got us going, I think, on this topic was, and recently in Transcendence, Wally Pfister
Mm-hmm.
was the director, but he had been most famous until this point for The Dark Knight.
Well, yeah, he
movies.
was Christopher Nolan's
Exactly,
cinematographer.
exactly, yeah.
And yet he spun off and made this really garbage, retch-inducing film.
The point,
Transcendence.
exactly,
But-
that when he tried to be a director, it didn't work out.
Well, Barry Sonnenfeld is the opposite story. Barry Sonnenfeld was the Coen brothers cinematographer. Barry Sonnenfeld shot Miller's Crossing, Raising Arizona, Barton Fink. He shot all those early Coen brothers films, and then branched off and started directing his own films, most notably Get Shorty. Barry Sonnenfeld had
Yeah.
quite a commercially
You're right.
successful run for a while.
And one topic that we have to cover right now,
Mhm.
before the show ends,
Yeah.
Ellen Kures is one of the only female cinematographers. We're doing this for Elizabeth, our attorney from Boston,
Okay.
who wants to be very careful about our keeping things equal.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to, and she did Eternal Spotless Mind.
Eternal Sunshine of the
Yeah,
Spotless
right,
Mind.
okay. And I've really tried to get more to make a balance, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, it's very
Men have
difficult.
dominated this field.
Interesting. You know, I feel like we're really doing a disservice to this this topic
Oh my
because it's
gosh.
so. You can really, get very esoteric very quickly. Michael Chapman, I see that name right there. What did Michael Chapman shoot?
Okay, he did, oh, well, you should.
Yeah, he did Taxi Driver.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah,
Good
right.
for you.
And Raging Bull?
And Raging Bull.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
I knew that name.
Yeah.
I knew
And
that name jumped out at me.
excellent. He is well known for the improvised rigs that strapped cameras onto actors. Must have used that maybe in Raging Bull, do you
Yeah,
think?
probably.
Yeah.
Just a few years before that, in 1976 with Rocky, not a lot of people know this, but the Steadicam, which really
Yes.
sort of opened up all manner of possibilities.
So you've got something strapped to you and you can walk around and it keeps.
And it does, yeah, running through the streets of Philadelphia, a guy was able to run with him, and also in the ring, he was able to stay with him, and that film introduced us to the Steadicam. I don't know the guy's name, but my point is, doing a disservice to this topic is we should really maybe have a second
Let's
part
have a
to this
second,
where
yeah.
we have somebody who knows about cinematography,
Okay, good.
especially contemporary. I mean, we're talking about all these guys who made
Well-
big imprints in the 70s and 80s, but
Let me throw out a name
Yeah.
that I know you'll know if you don't know the film, Roger Deakins.
oh yeah, I know that name.
Okay, we're talking very contemporary. Most recently, Skyfall.
Is that right?
Yeah, and there's a
Wow.
beautiful piece of
Yeah,
photography.
look at
And Oh Brother, Where Art Thou before that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so.
No, Skyfall has a very. I'm thinking of those shots of Daniel Craig looking out over London.
Yes.
Um,
And then Scotland.
Oh, yeah,
Beautiful
right.
landscapes of
it has
that.
that wet kind of gray
Exactly.
hue. I love that.
Yep.
That's great. All right. Well, let's get a cinematographer here.